On the sunny side of life, it will help us every day to right on our way. It will keep on sunny side of life.
I did.
Let us pause for a song of each day. All the moment be cloudy or bare. Let us trust in our future always. You keep us everyone with care. Oh, keep on the sunny side, always on.
This is just a sound check,
Keep on
and then they'll start the show.
It will help us every day, we'll brighten on our way. It will keep on sunny side of life. It will keep on sunny side of life.
Thank you to the String Beans for the great start to our program today. I'm Bill Havedank. I'm the Executive Director of Veterans for Peace, Chapter 115. Glad to see you all here today. We hope more will join us as time goes on. So we have a full program, so we better get started here. What a great day we have too.
Yeah.
And I hope you got a chance to go down and see the boat down on the levee. And after 7 o'clock, there'll still be enough light probably to run down there to see the boat if you get a chance. Of course, the Golden Rule's mission is on the Great Loop journey, is to eliminate nuclear weapons. And I hope you can stay for the whole afternoon, and we have a great lineup of speakers and some entertainment. Anyway, and we thank Red Wing for the use of this facility and the help they've so far provided to us for these events. So it's customary at our VFP events, we start out with the bell ringing, and I would like to call up the bell ringers to do that, and Steve McEwen will explain a little bit why we do that.
11th, which is commonly known as Veterans Day, which Veterans for Peace calls Armistice Day, and more and more it's being called that. We call it that name because that's what it originally was, until it got changed in 1954 after World War II and the Korean War, because when Armistice Day was named, it was after the war to end all wars, World War I. So they couldn't very well keep calling it Armistice Day. That takes away the legitimacy of war. Trying to abolish war. And so we try and bring back that memory. When bells rang throughout the world, you couldn't find a bell to ring. And they rang joyously, and they also rang in sorrow for the people that were lost. That bloody war that 20 million casualties. So we do it on special occasions also, such as this, and also when it's our time to go instead of the 21-gun volley. So on the 11th day of the 11th hour, in the 11th month, bells were rung throughout the world. War had its day, and our job is to bring that back.
It's also customary at our events we read the Veterans for Peace mission statement.
And actually, a part of this too, before I read the mission statement, I always like to acknowledge that we're on the ancestral grounds of Dakota people who have been here for thousands of years. And so I'd like to acknowledge that we're on that and honor that with our presence, and hopefully we're doing a good job of being good stewards of the land too. We as military veterans do hereby affirm our greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others both nationally and internationally to increase the public awareness of the causes and costs of war, to restrain our governments from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, to resist racism and repression in our home communities, to oppose the militarization of law enforcement, to end the arms race, and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, the golden rule, right? To seek justice for veterans and victims of war, to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. To achieve these goals, members of Veterans for Peace pledge to use nonviolent means to maintain an organization that is both democratic and open, with the understanding that all members are trusted to act in the best interest of the group for the larger purpose of world peace. Thank you.
So now our first item on the agenda is to call upon a great friend of ours. He's also a member of Veterans for Peace. He's a Lakota Sioux. His name is Strong Buffalo, also known as Tom LeBlanc. And he's performed here at several of our Peacestock events. And he always has great inspiration and poetry and music. So I'm going to call upon Strong Buffalo.
Well, good afternoon. Little clarification, I am a Dakota, which is from the east. This dialect, L is from the west. Red Wing was a Dakota chief, by the way. We have a meeting in Prairie Island. We'll be leaving off to, we're going to have a meeting at the Bark Lodge that was built in Prairie Island. It's our summer lodges, and there hasn't been one since about 160 years. We're kind of proud of that. I am a proud member of Chapter 27, Veterans for Peace. 1984, I went down in behalf of Veterans for Peace on a mission to Nicaragua to release Mosquito Indians from prison. So I've been involved with that. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran, Vietnam, decorated and wounded. My first operation was in Way City, was on 7 operations there. Upon leaving there, I was denied promotions and awards because I began to speak out against the war. We had to change in the war while I was there. Nixon was the president then, and they did a Vietnamization program where we went from offensive to defensive maneuvers. And I could not participate in starving people, and spoke out against it, and was told I wouldn't get promotions, I wouldn't get my awards, and I just kind of went internally believing, why can someone speak about what they feel is right and start being denied. I am what we call a Yaska, which is a mixed blood Dakota. My mother is a Dakota from assisted in South Dakota. My father is unknown on my birth certificate, but talking to my family, it's assumed that he was American Japanese that was with 442, stationed out at Fort Snelling in West, and he was a married, so my mother didn't tell him of my birth, and I was taken away from my mother because she was 19, with at that time a minor, and she was sterilized at that time also. So I believe, and I tell everyone that I was made out of love. And these are supposed to be enemies of each other, and they made me. I didn't know who I was or what I was as I grew up here in Minnesota. They wouldn't tell me what nationality I was. They weren't going to tell me until after I was 21 years old. I hounded a counselor. I went to boarding school in Nebraska, and a counselor finally told me that my mother was Dakota. I ran away from that boarding school. At 16, I had been in 105 different social placements, and was kind of going crazy. I tried to find my mother, to no avail. I stole the car. I got in trouble for that. I ran away to Chicago. I lived down there on an alias and on the run. I came back after I was 18 and found out that because I hadn't gotten in any trouble, they dropped the charges on me. I have to thank the Attorney General at that time was Walter Mondale for speaking up for me. And appreciated that. He wouldn't send me down to Nebraska. But you know, when I came back from Vietnam, I found my family. I came out of the Greyhound bus depot. I had plenty of money, but I was reluctant to meet my family. I didn't know who they were or why I was never with them. And I was reluctant to meet them. But you know, in those days when we were coming out, you got kind of like discount free travel if you were a veteran. So Greyhound gave me a discount. I was on the bus from Camp Lejeune to here in Minneapolis, and I was still in my uniform. And I went by where I used to work. I worked at a restaurant in downtown Minneapolis called the Hungry Eye. So I went by there to check it out, old Greasy Spoon place. There's a dishwasher there. And as I was going by, I ran into an Indian woman. She hollered out, "Hey, Jarhead, are you an Indian?" And I had just found out a few months earlier from writing BIA that I was legitimately one and enrolled. And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, you should be in here." She called me in to meet. She said, "There's like 10,000 Indians in here." It was kind of American Indian education meeting. I went in there and she said, "I'm gonna buy you a drink for surviving the war." I said, "Well, thank you." You know, I was a whiskey drinking guy in those days. And when I was in there, they started talking, all these Indians in this little bar. We need to teach our language. We need to teach our culture. They're denying us. They got us down in the basement. No one's coming down there. No one's listening to us. Let's just take over the stage," they said. "Let's just take the microphone out of their hands and take it over." And everyone, they said, "What do you think? What do you think?" And went around the circle and finally came to me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm with you guys." Yeah. And we went up and we took over the microphone, took over the stage, and he started talking. I said, "Wow, these guys make sense." And I realized later, all those guys in that room were like Clyde Belcourt, Dennis Banks, Russell Means, Mary Jane Wilson, Francis Fairbanks, Rita Rogers, all the founders of AIM. And I just happened upon them. So I started joining them, and from there I went into the International Treaty Council. I worked over there in the Bay Area for human rights. And from that I went to work. Indigenous people around the world came up to me and asked me if I would help them. affected by the nuclear struggle. So we formed an organization called Indigenous Uranium Forum. And our motto was, leave uranium in the ground. It was the best policy that we could think of, because once you break it out of its rock, poison is emanated, and it's no way you can undo it. And so I went around the world helping, bringing that out. And we ended up in 1990 in Salzburg at a place called the World Uranium Hearing. I was the indigenous coordinator and brought in over 100 indigenous people from around the world to testify and to bring that about. I traveled the world as an activist. People believed that I was paid high money and had an office and expense, but I was more or less homeless, without salary. I just survived on my poetry, which, doesn't bring one much money. But I worked in behalf of that. I went to Switzerland, and when I went into Switzerland, the Swiss police stopped me at the airport, and they said, you have to go to the police to register. I said, what? You have to go to the police, they said, to register. And when I read the thing they had on me, they were saying I wasn't supposed to speak against any Swiss national organization or any corporation in Switzerland, or I'd be immediately deported and stopped. And I said, well, okay. And I went to a University of Bern where I was a speaker, and I sat there, and a reporter came up, started talking to the translator with me, and said, have you read this press release, Mr. LeBlanc? I said, what? Press release? I said, what's it about? They said, you. I said, me? I said, how long is it? They said, 12 pages. I said, about me? I said, well, translate it for me, please. So they began to say things like, don't listen to this guy. He's a nobody from nothing. We checked with the BIA. They don't know him. He's got no degree. He doesn't know anything about nuclear stuff or physics or anything. Don't listen to him. He's just a troublemaker. We don't know who he is and where he's from, and don't pay no attention to him. And he kept going on, and I just had kind of prepared kind of a generic speech. And I just went bananas, I was just thinking, wow. And I looked at the date of that press release, and it was a month before I came. I went like, wait a second, If I'm a nobody from nothing, and I don't know nothing, and nobody should listen to me, why do you write 12 pages about me and send it around and make me sign some kind of waiver where you're going to deport me? So I began to tell him the truth. I said, you turn on that switch and you kill an Indian. You make a nuclear bomb and you're jeopardizing the future of our children and our grandchildren. I said, what's going on? I said, you guys think you're so smart. You guys, you of war and of these corporations, and you can't even clean up your waste. You smart guys. Tell me that. Do that first. Clean up your waste. And they couldn't answer me. I went to the Tokyo Electric Company in the mid-'80s. And I asked them, I said, hey, what do you get this nuclear stuff? We got to stop it, because Japan is very nuclear pro, even though they got bombed on by it. And the Tokyo Electric Company, there was 3 of them executives speaking, and he said, I guarantee you this will never have any kind of problem. Now we all know that was an outright lie. And so I sit there today, now, talking to you, and making you as one person to another. We have to make some changes in this world. We can't depend upon any government, any politician, any corporation, anybody else. It has to be us. It has to come from the people. We have to begin to make these changes in this world, or there's going to be no changes. It has to come from us. That's why I'm a part of this organization, because I believe in what we're standing for. The few people who are standing up for peace. I wrote a couple poems that I'll close with. I wrote this one, it's called Agent Orange, White and Blue. While the enemy was digging hidden underground caves to hide from the United States systematic chemical war to force the guerrilla out, the smart men of war forgot or intentionally allowed their own sons to stand naked above, breathing the aging brother's stench. I am now the son of Dioxin, and you shall see me, Uncle Sam, digging out of hidden underground caves, looking for you. I also wrote this one called Peace Prayer, because, I'm not always that angry. But Agent Orange is something that we all need to realize what they did to us. I can remember standing there covered with the white powder of it. I remember looking over and seeing countrysides totally bare 1 week later. No leaves on the trees, no grass, nothing. Dead from the herbicide that we were doing, just so we could see the enemy. Oh, Grandfather God, pity us. Lean to hear our feeble voices for all those seeking peace, surrounded by war and hate's violence. We arise in the east, standing up, seeking a new day of hope. We walk to the south, where life comes from, bringing a warm rain to wash away the evil from those of violence. We go to the west, the gateway to the other side, seeking guidance and wisdom for this lonely journey we find ourselves on. We go to the north, where the cold wind helps us to endure all the pain and suffering of this life. And then we go to the center of the circle and we reach down and we caress our Mother Earth, who loves each and every one of her children. And we look up and we look all around and we thank you, Creator, for this wonderful life that you've given to us all. And we see the sun, something so beautiful and so important. You must have made, you must visit, or you're there. So we place our prayers of peace up there so you can hear them. And we hear you when you tell us peace is stronger than war. Yes, peace is stronger than war. And peace must be taught. And peace must be shared. And peace must become the law for us all. Thank you very much, and I hope that we continue to stay strong in what we're doing, because peace is one of the most noble things that we can do. And if we can heal ourselves, there's a chance that we can heal this world. If we can heal this world, maybe we can save it. So thank you, brothers and sisters.
Well, thank you. That's so inspirational, and learning a lot more about your story. And we here will never silence you. So we're going to be calling upon you again. Thanks again. Oh, I want to say something about this lectern. Here. It was donated to us by a dear VFP member here in Red Wing. His name was Jack Norgard. So he donated this to us, and I want to remember him because he passed away last spring. So, presente, Jack. And also, we lost another member from our group, Paul Drodas. He was a great member of Veterans for Peace. He was also a county commissioner, and very progressive and a good person to know. We miss him too. Presente, Paul. So why is this mission of the Golden Rule so important? It's because now we find ourselves closer to a nuclear war than we have ever been. There are over 12,000 nuclear weapons in the world, with the United States and Russia holding 90% of them. There are over 2,000 nuclear weapons on a hair trigger as we speak. It's estimated that just 100 nuclear weapons exploded at one time would end life on Earth as we know it. And the sad thing is that nuclear war could begin as an accident and not intentional. So the United Nations decided, and many countries got involved, and they signed the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. It was put in place in January of 2021, and over 80 countries have endorsed and signed the treaty. They no longer want the 9 nuclear weapon holding countries that are quarreling amongst themselves to hold the world hostage to this threat. And we should no longer expect them to. The Golden Rule is calling its mission the Great Loop Voyage, and I'll let Helen explain more about the Great Loop Voyage. But Red Wing is the second stop on the river after touring up from the Twin City area. And it's going to make 20 stops along the Mississippi River and then go up the East Coast. So she'll tell you all about that. And of course, it's an expensive mission, and any financial support is most welcome. We hope this expense proves to be successful. You can give directly to the Golden Rule, or you can give to Veterans for Peace 115 or Chapter 27, and much of that money will be going directly to the Golden Rule. It is our moral duty to help end the threat of nuclear war, and a war where so many millions, if not billions, of innocent people will die. People who have no quarrel with those who pose this threat. Thank you for any support you can give, and thank you for coming today. So, with that, time for some music. We often have music in our Peacestock programs, and we have a wonderful troubadour who hails from Northfield, Minnesota. He's performed at several Peacestocks, and he's performed at a lot of Veterans for Peace events. And so please give a warm welcome to Bill McGrath.
Glad to be here. Glad you're all here. I'm going to start out with a song that has to do with World War I. In 1916, there was a battle near a river called the Somme, and there were 20,000 men on our side killed in the first day, and a lot of Germans too. How do you do, young William McBride? Do you mind if I sit here by your graveside? Rest for a moment in the warm summer sun. I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. See, by your grave you were only 19. when you joined the great fallen in 1916. Well, I hope you died quick, and I hope you died clean. William McBride, was it slow and obscene? Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the sack slowly? Did they sound the dead march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flower in the forest? Did you leave a wife or a sweetheart behind? In her loyal heart is your memory enshrined. Though you died back in 1916, in her loyal heart you're forever 19. Were you a stranger without even a name? Your image preserved behind some old glass pane. In an old photograph, torn, tattered and stained, and fading to yellow in the brown feather frame. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the dead march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flower in the forest? The sun shines down on these green fields of France. Wind blows and the red poppies dance. The trenches have vanished long under the plow. No gas, no barbed wire, no guns firing now. But here in this graveyard there's still no man's land. Slows the crosses in mute witness stand to man's inhumanity and different plans. And a whole generation was butchered and damned. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the dead march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flower in the forest? Now I must ask you, young William McBride, do the men who lie here know why they died? Did they really believe when you told them the cause? Did they really believe that this war would end more? The suffering, the sorrow, the glory, the shame, the killing and dying, it was all done in vain. For William McBride it has happened again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the pipe slowly? Did they sound the dead march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flower in the forest? Is it okay if we do a John Prine song? Anybody object? Sing along. All of my songs are sing-along songs today. Why suggested Reader's Digest in the back of the dirty bookstore? A plastic flag with gum on the back fell out on the floor. Well, I picked it up, I ran outside, slapped it on my window shield. And if Betsy Ross could see me now, I'd tell her how proud I feel. But your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. They're already overcrowded with your dirty little war. And Jesus don't like killing, no matter what the reason for. And your flag decal won't get you in heaven anymore. Well, I went to the bank this morning. The cashier said to me, if you join the Christmas club, we'll give you 10 of those flags for free. Well, I didn't mess around a bit. I took him up on what he said, and I plastered those flags all over my car and one on my wife's forehead. But your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. They're already overcrowded at the little dirty wall. And Jesus don't like killing, no matter what the reason for. And your flag decal don't catch you in heaven anymore. Well, I got my window shield so filled with flags I couldn't see. So I drove that car up on the curb right into a tree. By the time they got the doctor down, I was already dead. And I'll never understand why the man standing at the pearly gate said, Bill, your flag decal won't get you into heaven anymore. They're already overcrowded with dirty little war. And Jesus don't like killing, no matter what the reason for. And your flag decal don't get you into heaven anymore. Kind of a true story. One more. Paul and Silas stuck in jail. Got no money for to go their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Paul and Silas started to shout. Jail open and they walked out. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. You know what scares me to my core is the fear of nuclear war. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Ease the war, ease the hate. See that justice takes its place. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. I wanna join the golden rule. Turn every harbor into a school. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Help me out now. Sing along. Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Only thing that I did wrong, stayed out in the wilderness too long. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Came the time for these wars to eat, so I joined the vets for peace. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. I don't know, but I've been told streets of heaven are paved of gold. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was awesome. You get better every time. So, well, I'm glad he's on the program twice, so you'll be hearing from Bill again. I see Colleen Brawley is here. She's graciously accepted an offer to speak to us today. You may know Colleen Rowley as a whistleblower back in 2003, I guess, or two maybe. But anyway, she tried to alert the FBI early on before the 9/11 attacks that this Masawi fellow up in the Twin Cities was a character that should be watched closely, and well, they passed it off. And she warned him, but it might have, her warning may have stopped the 9/11 attacks, but she got in trouble with the FBI for whistleblowing, but she did get on the Time magazine as one of the Women of the Year in 2003 or 4, I believe. Anyway, but she has so much knowledge of world affairs and foreign policy that I wanted to call on her today because she may have some insight on the nuclear threat that we're facing today. So please give a warm welcome to Colleen Rowley.
Well, I hope it's not too soon for Debbie Downer. No one has ever accused me of being overly optimistic. And unfortunately, we have right now really the most dangerous and sad reality. All those years that we got petitions signed and wore buttons and tried to, educate people about the dangers of nuclear holocaust and nuclear global annihilation. All those years that we did this are coming really almost today, as we sit out here in this beautiful park with beautiful weather. This could almost be termed the official start of World War III. And here's the reason why. I read stuff from all angles all the time. I'm on a whole bunch of lists, and a lot of them are like retirees from government, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, retired CIA like Ray McGovern, actually even some nuclear experts. And today it looks like Ukraine has applied for expedited admission to the NATO. And it looks like Jens Stoltenberg is going to announce it. He said there's an announcement coming. He didn't say what. Now, this isn't Colleen Rowley. These are the experts. When that happens, that will mean the official start of World War III, the admission of Ukraine into NATO. Unofficially, of course, this started a long time ago. Ukraine is de facto a member of NATO anyways. NATO's in this war. However, the official start could be happening just as we speak today. There's another reason why there's a lot of reasons, but another reason why I think we are coming to this really crucial turning point. I don't know if people remember Bruce Gagnon, who actually spoke at Peacestock a few years ago. And he is writing at this point that it is absolute. Read his article. The title of the article, it just came out today. Gosh, I should have brought it with me. Now I can't remember the title. But in Women Against Military Madness, we were circulating that article. And it's so sad because after the bombing of the Nord Stream, and of course the United States is blaming that on Russia, but by all the evidence, it looks like this was the United States and NATO that bombed the Nord Stream. Biden announced that we were going to take out the Nord Stream. It's kind of dumb in a way when you let your own president announce ahead of time that you're going to conduct a terrorist act, and then afterwards try to blame it on somebody else. It's kind of a dumb move, I think, on their part, but maybe Biden just blurted it out. I don't know. So that happened, and then the bombing of the nuclear plant in Ukraine, which again, the U.S. and NATO blame on Russia, but by all realistic intelligence analysis, that is actually, why would Russia be bombing themselves? It makes very little sense. And it looks like that also is the Ukrainian proxy forces that the U.S. has pushed to bomb the nuclear plant there. Now, if you know how dangerous,
Look at the Baltic Sea taking out this oil. I mean, if you're against climate change, just imagine what that did. That's a terrorist act. And our country now, especially led by these top warmongering neocons and neo-libs in the present administration, Jake Sullivan, who by the way is local Minnesotan, used to work for Klobuchar. And Sullivan and Blinken, it looks like that there's been prior plans that, you know, they're talking already about that there will be a bomb, that we're going to say Russia is bombing the Donbass. Again, it doesn't make sense, they'd be bombing themselves, but that's what we're going to say. That's already out there, that this is going to happen. And once that happens, if it is a tactical nuke, the chance of this escalating, it's hard to say it will be accidental, by the way, because a good number of people that the heads of our government believe that it's possible to use a smaller, they call it tactical nuke. Okay, they believe that that may not escalate into a global annihilation. So that's being talked about. And there's a large faction that want to do that. And then they'll say that it's Russia that did it, and now we can just go at it, unless Russia just completely backs down. So there's three theories. One is that this is all bluffing. Remember when Trump bluffed North Korea? So it kind of worked in a way for a little while. He bluffed that the United States was going to take out North Korea. Okay, so there's one faction of people that think this is a bluff, that by the way, look at the terminology. The United States warns against that we will use nuclear weapons. We warn. That's kind of a nice term, that we warn. But we say that Russia threatens nuclear weapons. Many people say, well, it's Russia that's threatening nuclear weapons. Well, you can find over and over and over that the United States has violated international law many, many times by also threatening nuclear weapons when we don't get our way, and long before Russia too. So it takes two to tango, but this is the sad thing. I will say there's one kind of, I took it as a good sign, but there's one of the top neoconservatives, Kirchik is his last name. He was the head of one of the Project for the New American Century for a while. And he has written that he's very worried. He wrote this article in The Atlantic. He's very worried that the anti-imperialist left, that's me, that's probably a lot of you out there, anti-imperialist left, is combining with the anti-interventionist right, and also the realists who are kind of in the middle. By the way, even Kissinger, you know, he's got a lot of problems, but even Kissinger has warned about this. In fact, Kissinger and Trump are the only two right now saying we have to have a negotiated peace in Ukraine. Of all the crazy things, Kissinger and Trump have called for a negotiated peace in Ukraine. No, yeah, exactly. No, even I thought Jimmy Carter might jump in. I was hoping he'd at least do this as well. But right now, I don't see anybody else at high levels that are calling for negotiated peace. And if this progresses as Bruce Gagnon, again, not me, but a lot of other people are foreseeing, this is awful. And I'll just go back to the song that was sung when I came in here today about Grandfather God. Grandfather God, hear our plea. At this point, it will require a minor miracle to stop it, because the plans are already in place. You know, and part of the reason why the plans are in place is the United States has been, the people, the American people, have been lulled into perpetual war. I wrote an article about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I couldn't get it published anywhere. And the title was Recipe Concocted for Perpetual War. They took away the draft. so people don't have a dog in the fight. They took away paying taxes for the war. We don't even have to pay taxes to pay. It just goes on a credit card. And finally, we took away casualties. We only aerial bomb or use proxy forces, so very few Americans are killed. And when you do that, when you make the costs invisible to Americans, they now rank war as the lowest. There was a poll done 2 days ago, and the first priority for Americans are jobs and inflation and all these economic issues. And you go all the way down to the very bottom of the list, the 11th place, that's the very bottom of the list of issues that matter to Americans, is war, other issues, and what's the other? There's 3 things and they're all together. A war and other issues, and people who don't know. So the very 11th one are people who don't know and war, ranks very last. So when you have Americans that don't understand the reality at this point, we don't understand it. We've never had war here. And when this happens, it's going to happen quickly. I don't think, maybe we will have some time when they announce World War III. We might have some time. But I just want to plant that in people's minds. And these are the experts right now. These are the nuclear experts who are worried to death. They're all being Cassandras, trying to warn about this, because if people don't understand, if we're too proud, this could never happen here. If we're too proud because we're America and nothing will ever affect us, then we can't even get to the starting place. And that is why Jake Sullivan and Blinken and all the others feel free to go to escalate, thinking we can use a nuke. Russia will just have to take it. We're going to take them out right now. We're going to take Russia out, and if we have to use nuclear bombs, we're going to do it. And Grandfather God, hear our plea, and let's hope that some miracle, minor miracle occurs and we can avoid this.
Thank you, Colleen, for that great message and history of where we're at. And where is Red Wing? Red Wing needs to be here to hear that. This is a nonpartisan issue. People need to hear these people speak, and we have a lot of work to do in a short time, so let's get going. So the whole reason we're here is because of the Golden Rule. So now I'm going to call upon Helen Jacquard, who is the director of the Golden Rule. She's worked so hard these last few months to arrange this whole trip, and she's got a long ways to go, but we're hoping to have her a good send-off to the Golden Rule and Helen on the way down the river. Helen?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody coming. I really appreciate we all really appreciate the support of Veterans for Peace and Women Against Military Madness and Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Thank you, Colleen, for scaring the living shit out of us. Which is, of course, a perfect segue into what's next, which is hope through action. And I think that's what Golden Rule represents to me, because in 1958, when the Golden Rule sailed towards the nuclear test zone in the Marshall Islands in an attempt to just interfere with that nuclear testing, they started an anti-nuclear movement that led to enough political cover that President Kennedy could sign the Limited Test Ban Treaty of 1963. And I also think that it was the anti-nuclear movement of the 1980s that influenced Reagan and Gorbachev to get where they were from about 80,000 nuclear weapons to about 13,500 that we have today. That gives me hope. But it's going to take a whole army of people that are instructors and activists and legislators, everybody, to make it happen that we can get down to nuclear zero. But that's where we have to go, because we have crazy people leading the world that think that they can get away with starting a nuclear war. You know, as Colleen said, even 100 nuclear weapons, or maybe it was Bill, even 100 nuclear weapons could produce nuclear autumn, which will bring enough ash and soot into the atmosphere to block out the sunlight enough that there would be about 10 years of decreased crop production and 2 billion people would starve. So that's the humanitarian impact of even a very tiny nuclear war, say something that India and Pakistan could engage in when you're talking about Kashmir, and you know, both nuclear-armed countries. So it doesn't even have to be Russia and the United States that do this. It could even be, you know, much smaller countries. We need a change of our culture. We need to go from listening to what the media says, the fear, the distrust, the aggressive posture that the United States has, to one of peace, cooperation, trust, but verify. I don't have a problem with verify. I don't have a problem with irreversible. So I think that we need to encourage the United States government, because that's who we have the power to influence. We need to encourage the United States government to first ratify the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But you can't just trust the United States regarding treaties. I mean, we have a Native American man here that talks about what happened, you know, to them when the Europeans came over. The United States hasn't lived by the treaties that it signed. And even those that you thought were safe, you know, like the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty that was supposed to keep Europe safe, Trump just said, oh, I'm going to unilaterally just tear it up? What? So how does one person get this kind of power? How does one person get the power to push the button in the first place? Congress is supposed to be the only entity that can declare war. And yet the president has the authority to start World War III by pushing the button and letting off some atomic bombs. This is crazy. There are a few senators and representatives that are a little bit more sane and have some ideas about things like that, like get rid of the president's sole authority to launch a nuclear strike, declare a no first use policy like China has, and implement a no first use policy by removing the warheads from the missiles in our ICBM systems. Now, the ICBM systems are just sitting ducks. Everybody knows where they are, and so if there's a nuclear exchange, they're the first to go out. So they cannot be a retaliatory weapon. They're gone. They can only be used for a first strike. So if you make it such that they're less likely to be used by removing the warheads, and you've got to then deliberately bring them back together again, like I say, as has China done, then you make it a little bit less likely that they will be used to start a nuclear war. Of course, we have $2 trillion going into the nuclear modernization program. Now, how many people know that we're developing new nuclear weapons and new ways to deliver them, right? Well, you all do. I didn't. I find it shocking. I thought that was all over with. And that's what's going on with the younger people today. They didn't have to hide under their desks like I did when I was in kindergarten and first grade, afraid that the USSR was going to bomb us, right? They didn't go through they didn't go through the Cuban Missile Crisis or the 1980s of people demanding that we get rid of nuclear weapons. So they need education. They need to know that there's a second existential threat out there. And that's the threat of nuclear war. And you really scared me, Colleen. I know what you said is totally true. I've seen the false flags. I've seen the warnings, and then the follow through, and then the blame that isn't right. So, thank you. So the golden rule, right, is on a mission to, just like in 1958, do what we can to stop the possibility of nuclear war. And what we're doing is educating people about what's the possibility of nuclear war and what they can do about it. So there's a perpetual bill in the House of Representatives right now. It's called H.R. 2850 by Eleanor Holmes Norton of Washington, D.C., who has no vote. It's an Economic Conversion Act in addition to being get rid of the nuclear weapons. So what it would do is get rid of nuclear weapons and take that money into other things, particularly clean energy, different jobs, things that are life-affirming. So I support that bill, and I hope you do too. And any time that you see a piece of legislation introduced that has to do with getting rid of the possibility of nuclear war, you ought to pick up the pen and write about it. You can write to, of course, your senators and your congresspeople, but you can also just write a letter to the editor. We all need to be educators. And so I encourage you to become one of those educators. You know, I'm just on a 100-city speaking tour by the water. And it's going to be up to all you all to start local organizations to carry on this work, because I can't be everywhere, and the Golden Rule can't be everywhere. We need all of you to do that. So, in fact, up in Duluth, Minnesota, the first place that we started speaking on as part of this Great Loop tour, they have started an anti-nuclear group that they're going to get together and they're going to decide what they can do to stop the possibility of nuclear war. And they'll have letter writing campaigns, they may have protests, they might have die-ins. What about a die-in where, you know, you don't just lay there dead, but you wake up with a sign in your hand saying, I didn't die because we got rid of nuclear weapons. So, you know, do a little street theater, do a little flash mob kind of thing. Whatever makes your boat float, get creative. You guys have all been there, you know what to do. It's more than just a weekly vigil. So in case you didn't know about it, we just started this 11,000-mile voyage. It's going to take 15 months because we have to follow the seasons. We can't be in the far north when it's cold out. We can't be in the far south during hurricane season. I hope those people of Florida and the Carolinas are going to be, well, I hope the impact is as little as possible, let's put it that way. This is going to be very difficult. And it's going to be very difficult for the Golden Rule to sail there. And, you know, hurricanes are part of global warming, and we need to make these connections, you know. Global warming, what it's going to do is cause mass migration, and the resistance to that is going to cause conflict between countries and between peoples. So we need to understand that this is another thing that could get us into a lot of trouble. So we need to take a serious look at both of these issues and invite each other to the table whenever we're talking about one topic. We should talk about both. Well, I'm probably out of time. Would let you know that I didn't bring t-shirts. All we have is smalls and extra larges. But I did bring pictures. So we've got a lot of cool pictures and some brand new calendars for 2023 up on the table here in a price sheet. And so you're welcome to come up and make a purchase that way, or just support us by giving a donation. We support ourselves through passing the hat at all of our events. It's what we've always done for the last 7 years, and it's worked enough so far to keep us afloat. So thank you for any help you can give us, and if you want to volunteer, go on our website, bsgoldenrule.org. Thank you.
Our next speaker, he's a highly respected Peacestock activist from Chapter 27, BFP. He's taken on the challenge of getting support from all Minnesotans, for all four corners of Minnesota to sign a petition to ban nuclear weapons. He's very persuasive, and he's gotten like 26,000 people to sign this document. Maybe he's going to keep going with that. So anyway, please welcome my friend Steve McEwen.
Keep track of the time here. My mother and I have spoken a number of occasions for actions years ago, especially the first Armistice Day, which we had going to Pipestone back in 1987. And she'd always, like at church or the Mass there, she would put a clock in front of her with the alarm on it and have it ticking. Well, I won't have the ticker, but I'll take a look at it. About 3-4 years ago, I was coming back. Well, Ron Seeger, will you stand up, please? Yeah. Okay. Ron is from Fargo. Comes down here, Veterans for Peace chapter, on a Peacestock. He usually flies in. This time he rode in. But I was coming back from Fargo late at night from his church on Armistice Day, his Unitarian church, speaking about armistice. And I pulled over to this town, northern Minnesota. It's probably about 9 o'clock at night, called Frazee. People know where that is. I've been there a couple of times, but I stopped in, I forget if it was the VFW or American Legion. And I came in there, I went in to ask the bartender, I said, do you mind if I went around and asked people to get some signatures here about nuclear weapons, for nuclear weapons disarmament? And he says, yeah, that's okay as long as you don't bother them. There was this woman standing right next to me and him, and my God, I've heard about the evil eye before, but this was it. And she was going around to the tables, and she said, this man is trying to take away our nuclear weapons. And so I did. I went around to the tables, and I got about 7 or 8 signatures, but she was kept at it. She was hounding me all the while and telling them that some of them were still signing. I got out there, and as I was driving away, I thought, hey, I'm pretty powerful if I can do that, take away all those weapons. So, but anyway, that was part of a campaign that Women Against Military Madness started in 2017, just after the treaty to ban nuclear weapons got a vote of 122 to 1 hands or voice vote in the UN to ban all nuclear weapons, to make it illegal. And so WHAM started a campaign, that's Women Against Military Madness, to start getting petitions, signatures, to support that for they were going to turn them into the Congress people. And I heard about it. And I've had some experience with petitions over the years. During the nuclear freeze, we had like 20,000 of them with 20 doors for the School of the Americas that we took down there. John LaForge had a good petition here that still is really applicable with the nuclear silos that were mentioned here, to get rid of those, be less targets if nothing else. Kellogg Re-Impact with about 13,000 signatures, and I think the Pipestone, where we got for nuclear disarmament for 2009. So when I heard about that, I got a hold of the late Marie Brown, and I said, I'd like to join this. And she said, sure. Call out to a meeting. My wife and I are members of WHAM. And so they were talking about these 2,000 signatures, that was their goal to get. I thought about that, and I said, let's get every town and city in Minnesota. Kind of looked, taken aback. I said, okay. So that's what happened. That's what we started. That's why I was in Frazee on the way back. It's getting too late to get too many more towns on the way back. But on that campaign, been to all 4 corners, like Bill said, of Minnesota. It's a beautiful state. You go through here, it's very diversified. It's the first time I ever seen sugar beets. You go down through the winding roads of southeastern Minnesota. You go out to the plains of by Pipestone, up in northwestern Minnesota. Sugar beets, and of course everybody knows what the North Woods are like. And you think about that beauty, and you think about nuclear weapons. The state of Minnesota is quite large. It's over 400 miles north and south, more diagonally. And depending on where you're at, it's over 200 miles usually east to west. It's a lot of small towns there. And what I set out, we wanted the numbers, of course, and but what I set out to do was to go into places where nuclear weapons, as Colleen says, it can happen at any time right now. But that isn't just now. That's been happening since we first dropped the bomb in 1945. It's escalated now, but it's been around. What I wanted to bring into attention, where there's not a lot of talk about nuclear weapons, and I went into places where, on Main Street especially, for example in St. Peter, just all the stores down there. It could be a jewelry store, it could be a general store, it could be the bars and taverns, a lot of American Legions, VFWs, butcher shops, back of the butcher shops, you name it, bait shops. We took the bus out once to Pipestone, a bunch of us were Veterans for Peace, and on the way we got signatures. And we got them where we could, like if there's a garage sale. I know one time I was driving the bus and there wasn't anybody there but the grain elevator, and that he wasn't from Minnesota, so we got out. I was driving the bus. There was this person that pulled out in their SUV, and I rolled down the window at the stop sign. I said, "I've got this petition. You're going to think I'm crazy." I said, "Would you like to sign it for disarming nuclear weapons?" "Sure, hand it over." So she signed it, took it off, and we went on our way. But that sort of thing, we had it on, when Craig Wood and I, he's not here today, we took the bus out, I think, on 3 or 4 occasions, like we stayed on a video overnight, Ely, Minnesota, Hibbing, and Bemidji. And we'd go into all kinds of taverns and stuff, and we'd stop at a gas station to fill up the bus, and Craig would get signatures while I was filling up the bus at the gas station. And Craig's very persuasive in the Legions, although you have a beer or two now and then. I don't drink, to get people. And when we pull up, it'd be late at night because it's about the only activity in some of these small towns. When you pull up with the Veterans for Peace bus, I don't know if you've all seen it, it's quite a sight to see coming into a small town. People are outside smoking, outside the bar. Here you got this bus up there that says Veterans for Peace, abolish war. They look at us like, once again, who are these people? So we ask them to get signatures. We're in a lot of Trump country, and we got signatures there. People, when you tell them that this treaty is for everybody, they would sign. People had their concerns. Like they'd say, well, we can't trust Russia, we can't trust Putin, we can't trust that little guy over in Korea, and this is too idealistic. Of course, my favorite line about this is I think it's too idealistic to think that we could survive or go on as we have. But the luck, I shouldn't say the luck, the support was there. The problem is, as it has been for many years, even during the nuclear freeze, people are willing to go along with this, but they're not willing to put in the work to do it. When Gorbachev came here, which is one of the best, into the Twin Cities in 1990, he and his wife, it's one of the best times I can ever remember in the peace movement. He came here and crowds welcomed him. He went and spoke where I worked at the time at Control Data. And when he left, to get on that airplane, and I live close to the airport, people were gathered in the streets. A lot of people that, hey, where were you all getting signatures for the nuclear freeze? They were waving. And it was so good to see not only that, but it was wonderful to see that plane taking off. I was thinking, no missiles are coming in, no missiles are going out. And there was hope then. And that's what we got to bring back today. Now, there is some hope out there also. Ukraine gave up all of its, the third largest nuclear weapons in the world at one time. 1,700 of them. They gave them up what was called Budapest Memorandum. in which the United States and Russia guaranteed Ukraine's security. So now the task is for them to figure out just what that is. And it sure ain't nuclear weapons, and it sure ain't the invasion of any country. But that's the task right now. And yes, we're at where the Cuban Missile Crisis is pretty well right now. And so far, the petitions, we've stopped that because it was ratified here, not here, but the countries that signed it. When 50 ratified, out of all those people that agreed to it, to start with, it has to go back to like their Senate, like it would here. They'd have to ratify it like a treaty. Well, when 50 did, which happened on January 20th, I think it was, 2021, they ratified it, became international law. It's against the law to have nuclear weapons. And now there's 68 that have signed that. And of course, none of the nuclear nations, the 9 nuclear nations, have not. So we've met with those petitions, our force from WHAM and Veterans for Peace. We've met with Congress people, some of them that aren't even in office anymore, in our senator's office. 2 of them have signed, McCollum and Omar. Senator Smith's office has been pretty receptive. We've been on a Washington, D.C. talk with their staff. We've met with them 3 or 4 times. But there's still work to be done with that. Some of them say, we don't get a lot of calls on this. So that's really the task right there. The time that we have. I remember, I'm going to kind of close with this, but a friend of mine, who got kicked out of Chile, who got kicked out of South Korea and was active in nuclear disarmament, he's now since passed away, a Korean War veteran, Father Jim Sinnott. He said, work while there's still light. And so that's what we have to do. I'm sitting next to my wife, maybe she can raise up the clipboards right there. That's one small thing to do right there. It's postcards. We'll put the stamp on it. Or I should say WHAM will. You have to be from Minnesota. Some of you have already signed it. Please, please sign it. And I'll give a pitch too, just like other people have done. When the nuclear freeze was going on, we had a priest come to our church in Richfield. I was on the Social Justice Committee in the early 80s. He was going to walk from where the Trident submarine was docked in Bangor, state of Washington, across the United States, take a ship across the Atlantic and go to Bethlehem where Jesus was born. His name is Father George Zabalka. He was the Catholic priest that blessed the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. He was in favor of that bomb. Then he had a conversion experience. He was going around as an act of repentance to draw consciousness, and he did this. He walked the 2 years it took to him. And what he said at church has stuck with me all these years and petitioning, and it's still valid today. Like Colleen says, it's going to take a miracle. And what Father Zabalka said at Mass today, he used the gospel of the wedding feast at Cana, where the water was changed into wine. And he said, it's going to take a miracle. But we have our part to play too. He said, just as Mary and Jesus told the people there to bring the jars of water to be changed into wine, we have our jars to bring, and it's whatever scope you can do. Some of that's petition writing, and there's a big jar down there that you can donate some more if you haven't already. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Yep, we'll keep up the fight. I'm sure I know you will, so we'll all help join you. It's time now to call on a great association with the Kessel Peace Institute. They're a student faculty association dedicated for working for peace in our community, our country, and our world. So Justin Beal is now the new director of the Kessel Peace Institute, and he's traveled all the way from Mankato to speak to us today to tell us about just what the Kessel Peace Institute does currently and how they see the future. And if the young people are getting behind us and working for peace and justice. Justin Beal.
Thanks, though. Everybody able to hear me okay? All right. I will do a little bit of telling you about what we're up to and how we see the future. But I'm a historian, so I have a story to tell. I guess to give away the moral of it, it goes along pretty well with what we've been hearing. Consciousness raising is worth it. And sometimes the unintended but beneficial effects are the worth it part. And also pay attention to the year that I mentioned a couple of times here, 1958. So, all right, with that, as Bill said, my name is Justin Beal, and I'm the current director of the Kessel Peace Institute at Minnesota State Mankato. The Kessel Institute is a coalition of students and faculty members who administer and work with an endowment that's honoring the legacy of a former colleague, Abbas Kessel. He was a professor in the political science department at Minnesota State Mankato for 19 years and a lifelong peace activist. Accordingly, we are proud that we're a partial sponsor of this Peacestock gathering. This is my first. Thank you so much for doing this in the fall. What a treat to drive from Mankato to Red Wing today. Absolutely beautiful. Let me read a couple of lines from the mission statement of the Kessel Institute, and then I'll explain their relevance to my talk. The Institute defines peace in its broadest sense, denoting not only the absence of conflict, but also the interrelationship of the factors necessary to create or enhance harmony within and among human beings and their environments. The Institute affirms Abbas Kessel's insistence that for peace to be possible, the values, behaviors, and conditions essential for positive human relations must exist at multiple levels: personal, local, regional, national, and international. So my corner of the academic work done at MSU Mankato is as a historian of Britain and of modern Europe. My own area of expertise in British history is a little earlier, the 18th and 19th centuries, but I want to talk about one of the more remarkable developments and movements to emerge in Britain in the last 100 years, and that was Britain's campaign for nuclear disarmament, the CND. This formally came into existence in 1958. And I feel some affinity for this movement because several of its leading members in the early days and also in the 1980s were British historians, my predecessors. And not just any British historians, some of the very best writers, most talented writers that my field of study has ever produced. What I want to relay, though, in talking about this group's activism is the sense in which, from an early date, it expressed values worth having for what the Kessel Peace Institute describes as positive human relations to exist. And there are many, but the two values that I'll focus on, probably not all that surprising, but maybe underappreciated as part of the ethos of nuclear disarmament. Those two values are ecocentrism and the suspension of distrust. A little background about marches. As I mentioned, the CND began in Britain in 1958. It formed around organizing a march, originally from London to Aldermaston, a city about 50 miles west, town about 50 miles west of London. Aldermaston was the site of Britain's atomic weapons research establishment. The march became an annual event, but after the first year, the organizers of the CND reversed the direction. They realized that if you started in Aldermaston and marched into the center of London, Trafalgar Square, it would attract more publicity and more media attention. And this is indeed what happened. The growth of the CND is a pretty phenomenal story between 1958 and 1962. So this is before the Cuban Missile Crisis. There had been earlier demonstrations, kind of ad hoc ones, carried out at the Aldermaston facility, but the annual CND marches were continual and they were popular. By the fourth march in 1961, there were 450 local branches of the organization and 150,000 participants in the march. And that made the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament Britain's largest political pressure group after the Second World War that wasn't itself a political party. So it was a rapid rise. Now, what was it that the CND was campaigning for exactly? I think you'll find this interesting. They wanted, organizers wanted, Britain to unilaterally give up nuclear weapons and also to withdraw from the NATO alliance. I think that latter part is really important because if you think about this in the 1950s, one could imagine a scenario in which giving up nuclear weapons for Britain or by British people would have been sort of an easy choice, right? They could have said, we can comfortably shelter under the nuclear umbrella of the United States and put our tax pounds into things like schools and houses. But the commitment to disarming and asserting neutrality, or the language that they often used, non-alignment, tells you that this was a protest movement against the Cold War framework, right? And that they wanted to find ways to put pressure on both the United States and Soviet Union to draw down the Cold War tensions and ultimately to draw down their nuclear arsenals too. So I'll come back to this a little later, but one of the founding members of the CND was the then octogenarian philosopher Bertrand Russell. And he wrote a really beautiful defense of the position of neutrality in addition to disarmament. So I'll come back to that in a little bit. First, let me just highlight the ecocentrism or ecologism that in some way the CND helped to foster in the 1960s in Britain. Jody Burkett is the current scholar who has studied the CND's evolution most closely, and she's identified ecocentrism as a value that this organization should get a little more credit for expounding and exuding. I find her argument pretty persuasive, and so I'll try to share the outlines of it with you. But something to just think about temporally is that it's pretty common for historians to talk about how in the 1960s the photos being captured by the Apollo space missions, the photos that showed the Earth as a beautiful but kind of whole system that humans were within rather than apart from. Historians talk about that very commonly as a pivotal moment in the rise of modern environmentalism. And there's no doubt, these photos did make it quite possible for people to visualize the Earth as a system, and by extension humans as dependent on the health of that system. You know, in the 18th and 19th centuries, Westerners in particular had gotten accustomed to kind of thinking of themselves as apart from nature and the Earth, and thinking of nature and the Earth as machine-like, manipulable, in order to produce human ends. And that, obviously, that attitude to nature is still part of everyday consciousness, but There has been a rising tide of awareness since the 1960s that we're not exempt from what happens to our environment, right? What a careful study of the CND's publications and kind of public positions in the 1960s will show is that the way in which they discussed nuclear weapons as a threat also did some of this work of preparing people, their constituents especially, for thinking of us humans all as dependent on our physical environment. This was not just because it suddenly became apparent that huge areas of the globe could become radioactive fallout zones in a relative blink of the eye. It was also that, and this is where Jody Burkett's argument is impressive, it was also that the notion of a nuclear war, think about the relevance, the notion of a nuclear war made remote war, a war in which two sides of the world were involved but had no physical meeting place in the middle, conceivable in a new way, right? So the world shrank, essentially. And not just in physical, spatial terms, but also in terms of time. Because in a way, and the CND representations of what a nuclear war would entail kind of highlight this, they implied a new kind of simultaneity. So clearly, nuclear devastation wasn't something that would happen at the exact same time in different locations, but it would happen on the same time scale, a blink of an eye. Is the way that this came across, right? So this was another way in which the CND publicity about the threat of a nuclear war suggested, at the limit of things, that there were massive equivalences in the environmental dependency of humans. A key thing that I want to just point out is that I'm not saying that we should give thanks that nuclear weapons put us in touch with our dependence on Earth and on each other. The point is rather that it took people like those involved in the CND movement talking about the threat of nuclear warfare to induce this kind of shift in ecological thinking. And one of the things that I really didn't know a whole lot about until looking into this movement's history was just how slowly the publics in nuclear-armed nations like Britain and the United States acquired information about nuclear warfare. And I confess, I don't know as much about this on the US side of the Atlantic, but in Britain, the government tried to keep information about its atomic weapons development projects pretty much out of the news. And quite remarkably, you can look at the mainstream newspaper press from 1954 to 1945 to 1954, and you will see that there is almost no coverage of nuclear weapons in British newspapers during those years. And of course, the main radio and television outlets in Great Britain during this time period were the BBC, so it was a little easier for the UK government to restrain what appeared on those channels. So this made the work of envisioning or of publicizing what exactly nuclear warfare might involve especially crucial. The work that the CND members did by constantly talking about the threat. It wasn't, I should just finish that line of thought, it was only once the news broke in 1954 and 1955 of the Soviet Union and the United States testing hydrogen bombs that more press coverage in Britain began to focus on the issue of nuclear weapons and the destruction that they could cause. And then, of course, short space of time, the British began testing their own hydrogen bomb in 1957, which amplified concerns about just the dangers of the tests themselves. But just as an additional iteration of this point, that the British government remained highly ambivalent about releasing information to the public on nuclear weaponry and nuclear warfare. There was a documentary, or a docudrama, we could call it, an imagined scenario film that was made for BBC television in 1965 called The War Game. It was a depiction of what a nuclear war between the superpowers would look like. However, before it aired, the BBC management decided to pull it from screening on television. It made appearances at film festivals in the fall of 1965, winter of 1966, but it didn't ever reach the mass audience that it would have by way of the television. 10 years later, in 1975, when the membership in the campaign for nuclear disarmament was flagging, one of the ways that the group started to reach out to a new generation of activists was to sponsor screenings of the war game, particularly on college campuses or university campuses, and expressly as a consciousness-raising technique. Yeah, there's a lot more that could be said about the CND in the late Cold War years. You may know that the current British Prime Minister Liz Truss has early memories of going to CND demonstrations with her parents. Her father was a mathematician and university professor, her mother was a nurse, and they sang anti-Margaret Thatcher songs at those rallies routinely. And now, if you've been paying attention to news from Great Britain, she seems to be trying out a rerun of Thatcher's trickle-down economic philosophy at present. So that set of issues aside, there is an ethos I would wish that Truss and others would recall that trickled instead down through the CND over the years. In 1962, Bertrand Russell wrote an article called "The Case for British Nuclear Disarmament." And within the article, this is in a section called "A Job for Neutrals." He wrote, "Whatever preferences an individual may feel for capitalism or communism, as the case may be, he can best serve mankind by remembering that the conflict between the two is much worse than either. And that in the service of humanity, the best thing that any of us can do is to mitigate the acerbity of the conflict. Some think communism evil, some think capitalism evil, but neither is as evil as the belief of each that the other is evil." Obviously, the unspoken thing that made the conflict between the two sides potentially so much worse than the coexistence of them was the nuclear threat. But even absent the nuclear factor, as a principle of peace activism, or as, again to put it in line with the Kessel Peace Institute's mission, as a value essential for positive human relations, that closing phrase, I think, really resonates. Neither is as evil as the belief that the other is evil. To me, right, this says that the belief that the other has it in for me just doesn't serve. Or at least, if I'm going to protest frankly and not cynically, I have to suspend my disbelief that my personhood doesn't matter to my opponent. I think this is a tough call to heed, and especially in the face of evidence to the contrary. And yet, we must in order to de-escalate. So thank you very much.
Great to have Justin here in the Kessel Peace Institute. We want to continue our relationship with them and our future Peacestocks. And maybe we were supposed to have a live event in Mankato Sibley Park a year ago, but the COVID came back and we had to scrap that to an online program. But hopefully we can get over to Mankato again and have another Peacestock over there. Get the students involved. I was hoping to have Red Wing students here today, but maybe they got a football game tonight or something. But anyway, we'll keep working on it. So now, great news, if you weren't here earlier, you get to hear Bill McGrath come back and do an encore of music, so please welcome Bill McGrath.
Thanks a lot. Actually, this is going to be a sing-along, and I'm going to call on people, and I want you to come up here and sing. We got the words, and Dave Logston is offered to hold the words so we can see his rear end, as well as seeing the lyrics. We're going to sing a song from Buffy St. Marie. Colleen Raleigh can come up and sing on this one. This is the Buffy St. Marie Universal Soldier. We've got all the words here. Don't be shy. This is your chance. There may be agents from New York here in the audience. So anybody that wants to be a star, this is your chance. Can you read that? Here we go. He's 5'2" and he's 6 feet 4. He fights with missiles and with spears. And he's on 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000. You guys sound just great. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he shouldn't kill. He'll either be my friend and be for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA. He's fighting for the Russians and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks he can put an end to war that way. Good job, Dave. He's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writing on the wall. You're doing great, you guys. And as out there would Hitler have condemned them in Dachau. Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war. And without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from here and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war. Give yourself a hand there. We have another song. Same key, which is convenient. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. Good job. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw a mighty room. The room was filled with men, and the paper they were signed and said they
what a great group. We'll call them back for next Peacestock, I'm sure. And thank you, Bill, for great music. Our next speaker is John LaForge. He's the co-director of Nuke Watch, a nuclear watchdog and environmental justice group in Wisconsin. And that's from Luck, Wisconsin. And if you've been to Luck, Wisconsin before, you see the sign when you come into town. You're in luck, you're in luck. Good sign. Anyway, he edits a quarterly newsletter, and he's a co-editor with Adrian Peterson of Nuclear Heartland Revised, a guide to the 450 land-based peoples of the United States. He's an advocate of nonviolent direct action. He's a regular contributor to Counterpunch and Peace Voice, where he writes on nuclear weapons, nuclear power, militarism, nonviolent resistance. He's also a co-recipient of the 2004 Social Courage Award of the U.S. Peace and Justice Studies Association and the 1986 War Resisters League Peace Award. So please check out nukewatch.org when you get a chance, but please give a warm welcome to our speaker, John LaForge.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for everybody for coming out tonight. A nice Friday evening in the autumn when you've got a lot of chores to do and other things you might be spending your time with. Get to listen to a bunch of mostly older white guys and colleagues. As Bill said, I've been working with Nuke Watch. This year is 30 years, my 30th anniversary of Nuke Watch. I brought a bundle of the latest quarterly that just got printed on Monday. It's hot off the press. If you'd like to get it in the mail, please sign up on the sign-up sheet next to it. I'd like to tell groups with Veterans for Peace that I was made an honorary member about 15 years ago. Having not been in the military, I had to make a sort of a special appeal. I said, well, let's see, I spent 4 years, wearing khaki clothes, eating terrible food, taking orders from idiots, and I had a firm release date each time. So maybe I qualify for an honorary membership, and they gave me that. So I feel a brotherhood there, a sisterhood. A longtime friend showed up tonight, my friend Wanda. We took philosophy classes together at Bemidji State, classes from Albert Finsky, if anyone remembers, the late, great Eastern philosophy expert. And we loved his classes, went to classes, anyone that he taught, we were there. One of the principles that we examined in those long hours was the idea that beliefs that are not acted on are worthless. And I guess I took that to heart. So when it came to graduation time, that year, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. This is 1979. That year, Jimmy Carter reinstated draft registration. It was only 4 years after the formal end of the Vietnam War. We sort of lost our temper with that. It was also the year that 3 Mile Island participated in a partial meltdown, dumped 500 million gallons of radioactive water into the Susquehanna River. Those three things compelled me to examine this philosophical idea that unless you act on a belief you have, the belief is pretty much worthless. So we started protesting draft registration immediately at the post office, like a lot of people here did. We started protesting the development and manufacture of nuclear weapons by a company right in St. Paul called Sperry Univac. They were building computers for nuclear-armed submarines, missile guidance computers that were going to direct the missiles from the submarines to their targets in China, Soviet Union. this fine public-spirited corporation came to Bemidji State for a career day, and we interrupted career day by having a die-in were mentioned earlier by Colleen. We had a die-in that day in the public meeting room at Bemidji, and we poured blood all over Spira Univac's materials. Just a simple die-in. But that was our first taste of the criminal justice system, because we were charged with interfering with the use of a public place. And that statute hadn't been charged against anyone before us. It was instituted after the Vietnam War protesters took over Merrill Hall on the University of Minnesota campus. Legislature snapped into action and passed this law that you could be prosecuted for interfering with the use of a public place. Well, I got 6 months in jail for that little offense, and got my first taste of the Beltrami County Jail. And supporters were outside on a regular basis bringing attention to Spira Univac and my measly attempt to interfere with weapons production. The criminal justice system is interesting because it's not fair to impoverished or low-income people in any way. We appealed the conviction because the judge used these decrepit, illegitimate jury instructions that shifted the burden of proof to me when the burden of proof is supposed to remain with the prosecutor. So while I was finishing up my sentence, the appeal was successful and the conviction was vacated. Now this is the experience of Native Americans and African Americans and people of color all around this country. So we got a taste of the real medicine by doing time on a false conviction right away, right from the get-go. Early on in the work I've done against nuclear power and weapons, I ran across a musician named Elmer Moss, and he would say the same thing in his lectures. He would say the three principal enemies of peace that we have to work against are ignorance of war, forgetfulness about war, and number 3, denial about war. And the fact that the U.S. public hasn't experienced bombing for centuries since the Civil War gives us the impression that bombing happens over there, and not here. So war is sort of a afterthought in this country, except for combat veterans who come back. And here we are with Veterans for Peace telling us the same lessons over and over and over again. The enemy isn't the Soviet Union or Russia or China. The enemy is warfare. Someday we're going to get this lesson straight from these guys. My friend Carl Cabot, who was a campus chaplain for the Catholic Church up at Bemidji for a while, he died in August at the age of 88 after committing most of his adult life to condemning and acting against nuclear weapons. He dismissed these international agreements like the Non-Proliferation Treaty or the Intermediate Forces Treaty. He called them numbers treaties. His point was that the Accords have, while they limited nuclear weapons, they never fairly condemned or delegitimized them. None of these numbers treaties called thermonuclear weapons the ultimate evil, as Justice Weiramatry did in 1996 in the International Court of Justice advisory opinion. None of the treaties stigmatized the bomb as contraband or inhumane, unlawful, or criminal. None of them until the 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, which has entered into force in spite of the relentless and blatantly hypocritical objections from the nuclear weapon states. except for the TPNW, these numbers treaties have always provided legitimacy and legalistic protection to nuclear weapons, and even granted a seemingly lofty status to the states that possess and threaten to use them. Witness the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the US, China, the UK, Russia, and France. All of them maintain nuclear weapons systems and routinely declare their continuous readiness to attack with them. They call this very real terrorism deterrence, as we know. Last month, as they did in 2015, these nuclear weapon states prevented agreement on a final document by the Review Conference of the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which concluded in August in New York. Cesar Romeo, writing for Project Plowshare, said that there was a cloud of discontent and frustration that descended upon the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference as it neared its end. Several non-nuclear weapon states protested that their proposals were largely ignored, while most concerns of nuclear weapon states were accommodated. While nuclear weapon states and their allies continue to frame nuclear weapons as a supreme security guarantee, the rest of the world considers them the primary threat to security and stability. At the end of the month-long conference, Ray Atchison with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom justifiably lambasted the nuclear weapon states' obstruction of the final declaration, writing, quote, "All the nuclear armed states approach nuclear disarmament as something that will hurt them. But for the non-nuclear armed states, nuclear disarmament is one of the best ways to help increase global security. And it's the only thing that will prevent the use of nuclear weapons end the vast expenditure on modernization and end the risks of nuclear war." It's Ray Atchison. I highly recommend her new book. You'll love the title. It's called Abolishing Nuclear Weapons and Smashing the Patriarchy. I was lucky enough to attend the first week of the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference in New York, mostly out of interest in how the nuclear sharing countries would be dealt with during this meeting. Nuclear sharing is the very unique practice by the United States of stationing its nuclear weapons. The model down here below is what is spread all over Europe. In Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and Turkey. The U.S. has about 20 of these B-61 bombs at 6 bases, 2 in Italy and 1 each in the other states. They're called forward deployed, the better to threaten Russia. In Germany, preparations are routine, and what the preparations are rehearsals for attacks with these hydrogen bombs. And the reason we know this is that newspapers in Germany and elsewhere regularly report on these practice or exercises. Headlines read, "NATO holds secret nuclear war exercises in Germany." Some secret. Or German Air Force training for nuclear war as part of NATO. Or NATO nuclear weapons exercise Steadfast Noon in Buchel. Buchel is the name of the German Air Force base where 20 of these 170 kiloton nuclear weapons are deployed. The U.S. 702nd Munitions Support Squadron, or MUNS, maintains these 20 bombs and helps load them onto the German Air Force's Tornado jet fighters. in the event the president orders that they be used against Russia. These Tornado jet fighters use weighted replicas of these bombs in their routine practices. You hear over and over again about the Ukraine war that it was unprovoked, but NATO and NATO states conducted 95 war exercises in 2021 alone. Those are directed only at the former Soviet Union, the Russian oligarchs at the moment. And these 100 or 120 nuclear bombs, they're gravity bombs, they're just dropped out of the plane. They're not missiles or smart in any way. These exercises are quite alarming and threatening to people of Russia, of course. While we were attending the meetings, we wanted to know if nuclear sharing would be brought up at all, because the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons has 6 or 8 articles. The first article says you're not to transfer your nuclear weapons to other countries. The second article says you're not supposed to receive nuclear weapons from another country. So nuclear sharing is a blatant, overt violation of this treaty, 1970, that both Germany and the United States are obligated to obey. So we keep thinking, well, my gosh, some country is going to say something about this at this meeting. And the only country to do so was China. And they boldly said from the main podium in front of the General Assembly that nuclear sharing by the U.S., those NATO countries, is a violation of Articles 1 and 2 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Well, 2 days later, Germany, through their ambassador Thomas Gummel, took the very unusual step of issuing a written response to China that was, you can get it on the United Nations website, explaining that this blatant violation is legal because these nuclear weapons that are forward deployed are part of a policy that was in place long before the 1970 Non-Proliferation Treaty was adopted. Does that make sense to any of you? Like the speed limit today is 55. 15 years ago it was 70, so we could argue we can still go 70. A slave trader could say, I can keep these people in chains because I bought them before the Civil War. That's what Germany actually said. So and that's what they've been saying for 35 years too. So we take these B-61s very seriously. We take the treaty very seriously, and we've been practicing go-in actions at this Bushel Air Force Base for many years now, and thinking, well, here's the idea. There's only 20 bombs left in Germany. There used to be 7,000 U.S. nuclear weapons in Germany. Why did they maintain 20? Because it's a status symbol. It's a political bit of terrorism that is used to convince people that nuclear weapons have a usefulness. They also have this other function. When you use conventional weapons to obliterate cities in Afghanistan or Iraq or Somalia or Libya, if you use conventional weapons, well, then you can say that was moderate and measured and reasonable because it wasn't an indiscriminate weapon of mass destruction. It wasn't a nuclear weapon. We've taken these go-in actions to the point where the Green Party representative in the Bundestag complained once. We had 18 people go into the base through 5 holes we clipped in the fence in 2018 on a Sunday morning, broad daylight, 11 in the morning. There were no guards anywhere. 18 people, 1 woman in a wheelchair, another guy in crutches because he had a broken leg. We all got onto the base. The woman in the Bundestag said, what is the Bushel base, an amusement park? So we made a a point of how insecure these weapons are practically by pointing out that there's no guards at the fence, and we clipped through this chain link fence surrounding this nuclear weapons base with little pliers that cost 12 euros a piece. We did these actions over and over again now, and so some of the charges have been catching up with us. I just got sentenced, you'll be glad to know, to 50 days in a German jail beginning January 10th. So I'll be back in Germany comparing the German system to our U.S. county jails. The argument we've made is that going onto the base and trying to interfere with the planning and preparation of a criminal act, that is massacres with nuclear weapons, is itself a violation of the law. We know this from treaties that were adopted, the Nuremberg Charter that was imposed on Germany after World War II states, this was language written by U.S. prosecutors, that the planning and preparation of a war that would violate another treaty is itself a crime before the war starts. So we always at court explain to the judge that we're justified in going in by the principle of crime prevention. The Bushel Air Base is a criminal conspiracy to commit massacres with nuclear weapons, and we're simply interfering with that crime. Everyone knows that crime prevention is legitimate. Everyone knows that a firefighter who breaks down a door to save someone in a burning building isn't charged with trespass or damage to property. Now the German judges have appreciated that argument just about as well as the U.S. judges here have appreciated that argument. We have, in 40 years, over 30 court cases, we've won exactly 2 times. And I like to think of that as a real relief, because I think it was Einstein, wasn't it, who warned us all, if you keep doing the thing that you're doing over and over again and you're getting the same result, nothing ever changes, then you might not be a sane person. So we kept getting convicted over and over and over. We're starting to think, ooh, Einstein says we might be insane, but we had an acquittal here in Minneapolis over depleted uranium where the judge, Jack Nordby, anybody know the name? He understands international law very deeply, and he questioned us thoroughly about our understanding of it. He let the jury hear everything there is you need to know about how poison weapons are forbidden ever since World War I. The Geneva Gas Protocol forbids the use of poison. And so we explained to the jury that law. We explained the poisonous of depleted uranium weapons. We showed the jury photographs of the birth abnormalities in the hospitals in southern Iraq. And so our crime prevention defense was successful here in Minneapolis. The other time we won a case was Minneapolis in Wisconsin. It had to do with the antenna system that sends secret messages to Trident ballistic missile submarines called ELF, extremely low frequency. Again, many dozens of protests there, but a few people actually shut the system off by cutting some of the antenna poles down. Our friends Donna and Tom were charged with sabotage and damage to property. Now in Wisconsin, the sabotage statute means, or in order to be convicted, you have to have interfered with the defense of the United States. So we had 3 expert witnesses, one in international law, one in ballistic missile development, and another, a retired submarine commander, who explained that ballistic missile submarines aren't defensive. They can't be defensive in any way. And it was particularly the submarine commander that got to the jury. He said, when the missiles on my subs changed to D5s, as code name for a first strike ballistic missile, he said he retired from the Navy then because that's not why he joined the Navy. and the jury was bowled over by him and the international law expert as well. So the two were acquitted of sabotage, although they were convicted of damage to property. We had these victories to hold out for ourselves against these recalcitrant judges who pretend that treaty law doesn't oblige the government to disarm. The Non-Proliferation Treaty has Article 6, where the U.S. and Germany both promised to get rid of their nuclear weapons in 1970. So we're going to continue making this argument. My partner, Marion Kupker, has exhausted all the courts in Germany, having been refused by the Constitutional Court there in a similar case to mine, and has appealed now to the European Court of Human Rights. Somebody mentioned Strasbourg earlier. Who mentioned Strasbourg? That's where the European Court hears cases. If you think you've been treated unfairly and have exhausted all your appeals in your European Union country, you can go to Strasbourg and complain. So we're arguing that the courts in Germany refuse to hear our experts, refuse to hear the crime prevention defense, and we need these defenses heard and explained so that we can get rid of the nuclear weapons. We really thought that a measly 20 weapons in Germany, and if Germany would lead the way and demand they be ousted, then the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, and Turkey could follow suit easily. I want to mention one thing that Colleen said. We really don't have to rely on Mr. Trump and Mr. Kissinger, because there have been several other prime ministers and presidents who have called for a negotiated settlement in Ukraine. Oscar Arias, who is the president of Costa Rica and now a Peace Prize winner, he's called for an interesting proposal. He said that the NATO countries should offer to withdraw all these B-61s from Europe in exchange for getting Russia to sit down at the negotiating table. And that if there was a successful outcome, then the nuclear weapons could be removed. This is a great proposal. In addition, the president of Austria, the president of Mexico, the prime minister of India, and the president of Egypt have all called for a negotiated settlement to the Ukraine war. And interestingly enough, all four of those countries have refused to join these sanctions against Russia, primarily because of energy resources they buy from the state. So there are some cool heads. They don't prevail against this coalition of 50 NATO countries now that are aligned with the U.S. and supplying arms, intelligence for this war. And we do have a long road to hoe to bring a halt to that with the $50 billion that are going in to supply weapons to this war. It's a function of this gigantic military budget that is so intimidating. It makes true what my dad said on his deathbed. I'll get to that in a minute, but the budget right now that was just proposed is $850 billion, which, do the math, that's $97 million an hour is what the Pentagon and the military is being handed while we scrabble for some donations and sell t-shirts. It's a difficult situation. That's why my dad said 2 days before he left us, he said, the situation is hopeless, but it's not serious. We try to make light of this with dark humor. There's no way around it. There's so much cancer and radiation-related illness from bomb test fallout and regular emissions from nuclear power reactors. that nobody escapes it. Let me see, do you mind a show of hands? How many people have experienced cancer or have cancer in their immediate family? This is where we have to take it to heart and take care of one another, because we might not succeed in knocking down the military budget, but we can take care of one another and watch out for one another as the situation gets a little more grim as we go along. There's a lot of high adventure that we can pull out of this movement as well. It is something to make a plan with 5 peace activists and go in to a German military base in the dark of night. There were 5 of us who went at night too. And to get on top of one of these bunkers where no civilians are supposed to be. No soldiers around. It took a while. We got through 5 chain link fences and got on a bunker. This was 2018 also. And still no alarms went off. So one of our party was an astronomer, and he gave us a little astronomy lesson as we looked up at the stars. And we said, well, I guess we have to alert the military that we're here. So we walked in front of the motion cameras, and sure enough, they came around. We scrambled back on top of the bunker before the guards came in, and they came in 2 giant, oversized personnel carriers, and they all scrambled out with their guns, and they were running around the grounds. They weren't looking up. It seemed like a Monty Python skit. We were watching from the top of the bunker while they looked for us. And finally, we unfurled our banner and said, "Yoo-hoo!" And then, okay, come down from there. So we came down, and they herded us out to the entrance where there's a big gate and formal entry requirements and everything. And they had woken up the base commander to come and see us for some reason. And this was 2 in the morning. So the commander eventually did appear, and he got the 5 of us in a circle, and he reminded us how words can't really achieve what we want them to when we're trying to explain the problem with nuclear weapons. I mean, they don't really do it, do they? The commander looked at us and said, "What you did was very dangerous, and it's not supposed to be fun." I mean, we were smirking, you know, we were so pleased with ourselves for getting on the bunker. But that's what I want to leave you with. You know, we can go up against the most horrific machines ever invented by the human race and still have fun. Stick with it, people.
John said he would stick around for some questions and he'd provide answers. So if you want to, we're going to bring a mic down in front here so you can step up and ask your question of John.
There's such a fantastic history in this country of the civil rights movement, where people actually risked their lives, and they did it over and over again. So principally, it's the legacy of the civil rights movement that inspires me to keep at it, especially the practice of violating petty laws to prevent a greater harm.
Now, John, 2 years ago at our Peacestock, we had Andrew Basevich as a speaker, and I asked the question, every time our diplomats and leaders of our country are negotiating or supposedly negotiating, they always say, well, everything's on the table. And I told Andrew, doesn't that include nuclear weapons? And he said, no, it doesn't. But in my mind, it does. It absolutely does. And I was just wondering what you think, John.
What I think of is that Blinken, or the former secretaries, I call them secretaries of hate, when they're threatening to, or drawing a line in the sand or whatever, and they say everything's on the table. That's their code language for nuclear weapons. But you're talking about disarmament negotiations and everything being on the table? Yeah, I'm not sure the U.S. Enters into negotiations thinking that they're going to get rid of any nuclear weapons. It has happened in the past. The START Treaty, the new START Treaty, they did reduce numbers of nuclear weapons. That's a fact. But normally what that amounts to is that the ones that remain are more sophisticated, they're more accurate, more expensive, and so the industrialists who build them and make cost-plus contracts to do so, they end up with all the desserts anyway, and they keep at it. That's why right now, this B6112 model down here, that's in production in the United States after having models 1 through 11 run through their lifespan. Part of this $2 trillion rebuild of the nuclear weapons infrastructure in this country includes $12 billion to make 600 new B-61s to replace the ones that are in Germany and Belgium and Italy now. Instead of taking this perfectly good opportunity to withdraw them permanently, they plan to replace them with a brand new version. Of course, the German public doesn't want that to happen. The most recent public opinion poll in Germany found over 84%, 89 I think, wanted these B-61s removed. But again, nuclear weapons policy isn't really subject to the democratic process, so public opinion is rather unimportant to nuclear weapon states.
Thank you very much for coming today, all the way from Luck, Wisconsin. Now we have time for some more music. The string beans are going to perform for us now. And you got a little extra time now, so have at it. Okay, they're always great.
First of all, we're just so happy to be here and to play for all of you and to play for the Golden Rule.
Definitely. And now, when I learned that we were going to come to Red Wing, I figured, gee, we better figure out what to play. And so I went and researched and found that kids learning piano often have a beginning book that has a tune in it called The Happy Farms to it. And then there was a folk singer somewhere around the 30s or 40s, Woody somebody. Woody, what was his name?
Woody Guthrie.
Oh, Woody Guthrie, that's right. He wrote some other words to it about unions and union made. But anyway, the tune is called Red Wing, named for the legends around this area, which is, of course, named for a Native American chief. This is Red Wing.
Wait a second, one more thing. You all look so cold out there. Could you maybe clap your hands for us? You know, get the rhythm going and do the rhythm for us while we're playing. It'll make you warmer.
are String Beans. I should introduce the band. I guess they did say String Beans. So named because we're pretty much all full of beans, and at least myself, I know I'm a has-been, so the name I guess fits. Chickpea and Garbanzo are married, so that's why we have the same name. Anyway, we haven't, the program didn't mention our fiddle player here, Refried, who's otherwise known as
Good to see you.
Blowing in the wind, I guess. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. You probably know this chorus. Please help us sing if you can, or if you want to. And that'll make you warmer too. And maybe get closer together. How many roads must a man walk down before we can call him a man? Yes, and how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times can a cannonball cry before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. You guys play it. How many times can a man look up before he can see the sun? Yes, and how many years must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths can it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years can a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head, pretending he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Down by the riverside.
Down by the riverside. Well, here we are, down by the riverside.
Again, yeah.
Pool is moored, and
We're going to lay down our sword and shield. We're going to ban all those nuclear arms.
Yeah.
We're going to spread peace around the world. We're going to cheer for the golden rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
help us sing.
We're gonna lay down our sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. We're gonna lay down our sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. We ain't gonna study war no more. We ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more, no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more.
because all the apples are red right now, and so there's an American tune that's called Red Apple Rag.
Malvina Reynolds tune called Magic Penny, and it's about love. And we think that love is a lot better than bonds. Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. It's just like a magic penny, hold it tight and you won't have any. Let it spend it and you'll have so many, all over the floor. Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you'll end up having more. Money's handy if you'd like to use it, 'cause it's better if you don't refuse it. It's a treasure and you can use it, you don't want the whole floor. Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you'll end up having more. You pledge. something if you give it away. Give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away. You'll end up having more. It's just like a magic pen. You hold it hard and you won't have any. When the stand and the house come in, all over the floor. For love is something if you give it away. Give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away. You'll end up having more. Give me more love.
Here's a Tom Paxton tune from back in the old world. It's called What Did You Learn in School? I'm ashamed to sing this. I was a teacher for 32 years in a junior high, but not everything we did was as a group was good. But I hope it wasn't quite this bad, but anyway, here it is. What did you learn in school? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that Washington never told a lie. I learned that soldiers seldom die. I learned that everybody's free, and that's what the teacher said to me. That's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that policemen are my friends. I learned that justice never ends. I learned that murderers die for their crimes, even if they make a mistake sometimes. That's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned our government must be strong. It's always right, it's never wrong. I learned our leaders are far-fine minded. We elect them again and again. That's what I learned in school today, that little boy of mine. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that war is not so bad. I learned about the great ones we have had. We fought in Germany and in France, and someday I might get my chance. That's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school.
Hey, great song. Who wrote that? Who wrote that?
Tom Paxton. Thanks, everybody. We sure had a good gas being here, and this is a good cause. The golden rule is once in a lifetime.
Thanks to String Beans. And Roger, are you going to the Phoenix area again this winter? And you'll play at the Wild West? Where? Yeah, Goldfield's Ghost Town in Apache Junction, just east of Phoenix, Arizona. If you get down that way, check them out. They'll be playing there. You go there every day, or pretty much every day? Okay, all right. Well, thanks a lot for playing for Peacestock. Enjoyed your music a great deal. So now I'm going to call upon the president of the Veterans for Peace, Chapter 27, up in the Twin Cities. He was probably most instrumental in getting the boat to come to Minnesota. So I want to tell him a little bit, him to tell us a little bit of story about how that came about, and maybe his message for nuclear disarmament. Dave Loxton.
And anybody who knows me, I'm always full of platitudes and gratitudes. Because basically, this just didn't happen. This boat didn't just happen. There was an amazing group of people that made this boat happen, and there's an amazing group of people that keep making it happen. A little bit over a year ago, I was at a conference, a Zoom call with the Golden Rule Planning Committee, and Helen Jacquard had this nice map of the Great Loop and their great plans to maybe do the Great Loop. And I looked at the map and I said, Helen, there's something wrong with this map. It doesn't, where does Minneapolis-St. Paul come into this Great Loop? And she said, well, normally the Great Loop just goes from up the East Coast, down the Great Lakes, to St. Louis, and then back down to New Orleans. And not too many people actually do go to Minneapolis-St. Paul.
They never do.
They never do. They never do. But I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. You got to come here. Jeez, Helen, come on. So that was the start of the insanity of actually talking Helen into coming here to Minneapolis-St. Paul, and coming, going doing the Great Loop starting from the closer to the headwaters of the Mississippi. So anyway, here we are, and I have to say, it's been frightening to think that Helen gets up and says, "Oh yeah, Dave Logg's going to talk to me." I said, "Whoa! This thing goes belly up. It's going to be Dave's Folly. It'll be known forever." But anyway, it takes a lot of people to do this, and I was just the fast talker, you know. I'm pretty good at that. So, but there's been so many people that have done wonderful work, hard work, and I just say, like for example, right here, Bill Haberdick. Let's hear it for Bill Haberdick. Bill, this is his baby, and he said, let's do this for with the Golden Rule. It's a perfect timing, and I don't know what he has in or so, but look at his day that he got. Come on, how many times I've tried to plan outdoor events, and it's like raining, wind blowing, gusts, cold weather, and this is just like dialed up the beauty here, and that beautiful tree is like speaking to me, you know. So anyway, it's always dangerous to start thanking people, because if you're the person that doesn't get thanked, and you say, "What the hell, Dave? What am I, chopped liver here? Come on, how come I worked that hard?" So there's a lot of people thanking, but I have to say that it's been emotional for me, because I knew that I had the faith in my fellow members of Vets for Peace. In this chapter, and in Red Wing, all these Vets for Peace people, that we could get this done. That we can get this boat here, we can get this whole thing done. And we planned 6 events in Stillwater, Hudson, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and we pulled off 6 wonderful events. And then this is the 7th, right? All right, Minnesota. And after this boat is sailing down the river, and we've had a small hand in helping that. But a lot of people like Mary McNellis, who did such an amazing job. Mary, get the hand for Mary, and her boy toy, Steve, actually did a lot of work sanding and painting the boat when it was in Hudson. And Mike McDonald, who took off early because he heard I was going to be speaking, damn him. But Mike, he had not only crewed, but he sanded, he painted, he did a lot of things. He did a lot of work, and also hosted that event at the Universalist Church. So it's very, very humbling for me to be up here, and I stand on the shoulders of all who have gone before, and I know Helen feels exactly the same way I do. And it was a leap of faith, but I've seen Helen work, and I've seen the amount of work she's done, and a lot of fundraising, and she has been the rock that's created this, kept this thing going. And I said, man, I got to work with this gal. She's good. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for all you coming out here, braving this terrible weather. Oh, no, wait. Well, thanks for coming out anyway. I promise not to have a big speech because it's going to get dark, and we want to get Helen up here, right? I want to get Helen up here to debunk everything I just said. Helen, get up here.
Well, the Golden Rule is a very special boat, and she's very lucky. And she's got a bunch of crazy people running her all the way back from 1958 to now. You know, Bigelow was actually the first captain of the Golden Rule. He was actually relieved that he didn't have to sail this boat all the way to the Marshall Islands. It's not very comfortable, and at the time it was pretty dangerous. The second crazy thing was when Jim Summers, a Quaker in La Jolla near San Diego, said, I think we need to take this boat out into the Pacific again because Trump and Kim are threatening each other with nuclear war, and we need to see what we can do to stop it, just like they did in 1958. And the third really crazy thing, the craziest idea maybe, was to take an old wooden boat and put her on a truck and go anywhere, let alone Minneapolis. What were we thinking? Anyway, we're here. I would like to just share one little thing with you that was probably the biggest inspiration for me to get involved with this project once I was sort of on board, and really inspired me. This is from Captain Bigelow. I am going because. I am going because, as Shakespeare said, action is eloquence. Without some such direct action, ordinary citizens lack the power any longer to be seen or heard by their government. I am going because it is time to do something about peace, not just talk about peace. I am going because, like all men, in my heart, I know that all nuclear explosions are monstrous, evil, unworthy of human beings. I am going because war is no longer a futile jousting match. It is an unthinkable catastrophe for all men. I am going because it is now the little children, and most of all, the as yet unborn, who are the frontline troops. It is my duty to stand between them and this horrible danger. I am going because it is cowardly and degrading for me to stand by any longer, to consent, and thus to collaborate in atrocities. I am going because I cannot say that the end justifies the means. A Quaker, William Penn, said, "A good end cannot sanctify evil means, nor must we ever do evil that good may come of it." A communist, Milovan Gilas, says, "As soon as means which would ensure an end are shown to be evil, the end will show itself as unrealizable." I am going because, as Gandhi said, God sits in the man opposite me. Therefore, to injure him is to injure God himself. I am going to witness the deep inward truth we all know. Force can subdue, but love gains. I am going because, however mistaken, unrighteous, and unrepentant governments may seem, I still believe all men are really good at heart, and that my act will speak to them. I am going in the hope of helping change the hearts and minds of men in government. If necessary, I am willing to give my life to help change a policy of fear, force, and destruction to one of trust, kindness, and help. I am going in order to say, quit this waste, this arms race turn instead to a disarmament race. Stop competing for evil, compete for good. I am going because I have to, if I am to call myself a human being. When you see something horrible happening, your instinct is to do something about it. You can freeze in fearful apathy, or you can even talk yourself into saying that it isn't horrible. I can't do that. I have to act. This is too horrible. We know it. Let's all act. Thank you.
Where are you going next? Next stop.
Tomorrow we leave 7 a.m. So if you want to see the boat off, get down there at 7 a.m. at the dock. We're going to take Bill Habedank to Lake City and drop him off there. We're also going to take Steve and Mary there and drop them off, and then we're going to continue on to Wabasha. Day after that, we're going to Winona, where we'll be for 2 nights. Check out the schedule at bfpgoldenrule.org. For any of you that are local here, the calendar that I made up last night when I couldn't sleep has the Golden Rule at the dock right here as the cover page. So that was really made for you all. If there's any left, you might want to snag one.
Thank you, Helen, and the Golden Rule, and you're such an inspiration to us, and we'll follow your journeys, and safe sailing, and safe driving too, because Helen follows them down the river in her RV, so. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and all of you who helped put on this Peacestock event. Yeah, we live in precarious times, and many may think that eliminating nuclear weapons at this time is impossible, but it's not. Nothing's impossible if we put our mind to it. It must happen before our leaders decide that they have no choice but to use nuclear weapons. Time is of the essence. And many of us here have lived our whole lives under the threat of nuclear war, and we want this to end. Much of the world wants this threat to end. It's obvious by the treaty that the United Nations signed. But we cannot go home today and think we've done our part to end this threat. It will not end unless each one of us does everything we can to speak out and talk to our neighbors, our friends, legislators, everybody. It has to be a forefront issue in this campaign that we're coming up to. We need our voices heard. And that brings us to a song that was played at our last Peacestock by the Wild Colonial Boys, who used to play at the Peacestock events out in the Hobgoblin Barn. But they wrote a song last year that we used. It's called Make Your Voices Heard. So I want to play that as an ending song for you to take home with you.
Even though it's just you and me, how we come to this? We're headed down a one-way street. It's rocky ground beneath our feet. It's always hit or miss. Stand up and make your voices heard. Poison winds have blown us way off course. The simple truth is that the choice is yours. Stand up and make your voices heard. to hold on tight. What exactly will our children think if we put their futures on the brink? Let's teach them wrong from right. Stand up and make your voices heard. Poison winds have blown us way off course. The simple truth is that the choice is yours.